so much for attending the virtual Arizona Summit on Volunteerism and Civic Engagement. This is our 10th year hosting this event, so we are very excited to have you all with us today. Like most things nowadays, it looks a little bit different, and we are sorry that we can't be together in person to participate in networking and those kind of things, but very happy that we are able to still host some amazing workshops. I see some folks who were able to join us this morning for the first session where we had Crystal Petrie. How long was I on mute for?
Just a few seconds. I apologize. I was trying to let somebody in the waiting room and it popped up anyway.
Okay. I thought I was just like talking and talking away, and you know that happens from time to time.
It was totally me.
So we've been at this for a year, but we're still having the same technical difficulties as everybody else. I think it's the one thing that brings us together for sure. I would like to introduce myself. I am Emily Litchfield. I'm the Director of AmeriCorps and Volunteerism Initiatives for the state of Arizona with the Governor's Office on Youth, Faith, and Family. As I mentioned, we have been convening this summit for 10 years now, and it has just grown each year. We are so excited to have some really great workshop presenters today, and in just 1 minute, I will turn it over to our presenter, but I would like to introduce him first. Dr. Max Clow is the Chief Program Officer at the New Politics Leadership Academy, a nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to recruiting and developing military veterans and alumni of national service to seek political office. Before stepping into this role, he was the Vice President of Leadership Development at City Year, Inc., the national service program headquartered in Boston. Max received his doctorate from the Harvard Graduate School of Education in 2005 and is an alumnus of 4 service programs. His first book, Race and Social Justice, A Quest, a Study, A Call to Action, was published in 2017. He now lives with his wife and 2 children in Natick, Massachusetts. Did I do okay?
You did great. You did great. Thank you so much. Awesome. Hey, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. I'm really excited. You know, as you just heard, I spent 10 years of my life at City Year, the AmeriCorps program, and service is I consider this home. So just a pleasure to be with you all and to spend a little bit of time with you here today. So let me see if I can share my screen. So we're here to talk about leading with purpose. I will say this ideally involves a little bit of audience participation sharing, so we'll do our best it's very exciting that there's all these folks on the call, but I'm hoping some of you will be willing to offer your thoughts both in the chat and out loud. But you know, while I was at City Year, I was thinking a lot about how do we unleash the full potential of a year of really demanding full-time service to develop leaders. And really my focus was on kind of inner transformation. I mean, City Year, like a lot of AmeriCorps programs, there was a lot of serving others, a lot of focusing on how do we support communities and help other folks. And the thought was, how do we make sure that while AmeriCorps members are doing that, they're also having a space to really turn inwards and be present to what their experience is, how it's changing them and their own why for things. And this work really grew out of that. I spent 10 years developing this at City Year and then jumped to New Politics Leadership Academy, where, you know, we just think one of the reasons our politics is so toxic and partisan and broken is because there are so few people with the leadership backgrounds of either the military or a national service program. And we just think that needs to change. So this is our approach to helping folks who have served think about whether they want to, you know, what does it mean to lead with integrity to themselves? And for some folks, that's going to mean running for office. And for other folks, it might mean something totally different, but the work here is how do we really get clear about kind of what our why is and how do we live with integrity to that? So that's what we're going to do. And I do just like to just a brief warm up. I would love to hear from 3 people. Why are you here? Just get a little sense. I know there were several choices. And if somebody wants to drop something into the chat, and if I could have, a couple folks being willing to say it out loud, just why this session? What brought you here? Anybody willing to speak up? Takes a brave soul. I know there's a lot of folks.
And I know some of these people, so I'm not afraid to pick on people.
Gregory.
I'll go. Thank you. So I'm Gregory Ohanessian. I am from the Public Allies program. This is my 2nd year, and I had heard about this program being offered like to alumni and some of the people within my program. And personally, it's like I'm not too much into like the political part, but I would hope that like there were some leadership skills that would help in the field that I'm interested in. And I'm more towards education because I work at a charter school, and I'm also into disability advocacy because I'm autistic. So I'm just seeing like if there's anything, any like skills that are offered from this academy, and hoping that it would benefit my work in the long run. And then if I don't do anything now, I should have the option behind it. Like, I mean, to do the option like later down the line.
Awesome. I have to ask, that's the mural from the Civil Rights Museum in Atlanta, right?
Yes, it is. I actually went there. So like the school I went to actually went to Atlanta for a civil rights trip. So we went to Atlanta, and then we went to a few parts of Alabama as well.
Great. I've been to that museum. Powerful stuff. Well, thank you for that. How about one more out loud? We're getting a bunch of great stuff in the chat. But anybody else willing to say it out loud? Carol.
Yeah, I'll go.
Oh, Carol.
Okay. Carol's going.
Go for it, Carol.
No, Brian, you go. I guess I'm just a little bit curious about this new politics leadership academy way. I don't know what that means at all.
Okay.
Politics, when I think of politics, unfortunately, I'm thinking about what's been going on in the recent history, which is quite tumultuous.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to see if this academy way, I don't know what that is. I apologize. So I'm curious.
That's what we're here to learn. All good. You're in the right place. Thanks, Carol. And Brian.
Brian, please speak.
Then we'll keep it moving. Go for it, Brian, if you're willing.
Brian.
You willing to offer what you were going to say, Brian?
You're muted, Brian.
If you're talking to me, it's DL. We got the link mixed up a little bit here. But at any rate, DL White, I also am a public ally, first year through the Phoenix component. And while I don't really have ambitions in politics, I think we're all political in the state in which we live, not just the state, the physical state, but the state of mind, the state of presence, the state of involvement. I, through my fraternity, coordinate political forums. We invited candidates, back in November to come in, and we certainly are in a heightened state still where we have to be front and center to the various things being done, especially as it impacts the voting rights opportunities. So that's why I'm here, to try to stay on the front line and pass on information to individuals who may be more inclined to run for a particular office going forward.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And I also see there's some great stuff going on in the chat. Always willing to learn more about servant leadership. And so great to get a little sense of why folks are here. I always like to just check in on that. So I'll tell you a little bit about who we are, just so you know the organization kind of putting this together. The New Politics Leadership Academy. Our mission is to revitalize American democracy by recruiting, developing, and electing servant leaders who put community and country over self. And as you can see, we're bipartisan. We just think we need more folks who have served the country and know what it means to serve something larger than self, stepping into political office. And we have programs going on. Answering the Call is our kind of entryway program for anybody who has served and has a question in their soul. Is politics maybe something I want to do? So you don't have to know you want to run for politics. You have to be kind of grappling with the question. And that's the program for you. And Staffing School is for somebody, anybody. You don't have to have a service background, but if you think you want to be a campaign staffer, so learn how to be a campaign manager or do finance or field, that's the program. And I'm going to drop very quickly, I'm going to drop something in the chat here. Those programs are actually, the applications are currently open. And we have a, if you want to learn more, feel free to check that out. I'll drop in at the end of at this as well, but just know that Answering the Call Staffing School, we're currently accepting applications. And we have other programs. Foundations is for graduates answering the call who want to be a candidate. And we have a whole series of speakers for our alumni just to kind of keep them connected. So we're really trying to create a whole pipeline to bring more servant people into politics. And again, 2 of our programs are open. So if you're interested, you can learn more at New Politics Academy or check out that link. Okay, that's who we are. But what we're really here for is leading with purpose. So purpose, what is purpose? If you look in the dictionary, it's the reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists, or a person's sense of resolve or determination. That's what the dictionary says, right? But we like to think there's actually a deeper dimension to purpose that really illuminates and informs what we do. So purpose, it actually comes from the Greek root pur, and you can find the same root in words like purify and purge. Maybe you want to take a guess, drop it in the chat. What do you think pur means? No penalties for wrong answers, just trying to get the juices flowing. But what do you think that word pur that's also in purify and purge? Any guesses out there? What do you think it might mean? Self, feeling of deep connection, interesting. Intentional, true, all good guesses, but not quite. The hidden root of purpose is fire. This Greek root pur means fire. So it's our inner flame, right? That keeps us motivated to do what we're doing. And this understanding of purpose is really central to the way we think about leadership development. So a key idea that we work with is that leadership is a dual journey. And here's what we mean by that. Within politics, we're trying to transform the world around us. And you are all service people, so this could be education. You could replace this image with whatever form your service takes. But we care a lot about making our communities better and creating positive change in the world around us. But at the same time that that's happening, there's a parallel process that is about transforming the world within us, right? So there's inner and outer. And we believe that inner change and outer change, they're too interconnected to separate. Just like those twin strands of the DNA, you can't pull these things apart. When you try and serve others, you're challenged to learn and grow. And when you learn and grow, your capacity to serve others is enhanced. So these things happen together. So we have a way of thinking about leadership development that honors the interconnectedness of inner and outer, and is also grounded in this understanding that purpose is about our inner flame. So we call it the flame. And looks pretty simple. It's 4 parts, but there's some deep truths about leadership here. So let me walk you through. So the first dimension, the first element is the handle of the torch, which is about organizational culture and values. And I know, City Year was really intentional about its culture. I imagine many of you in service programs know what this is about, but being embedded in a particular culture with a particular set of values develops us. And for New Politics, we went through a whole process, and our core values are courage, integrity, empathy. Ambition is a blend of humility and ambition, and then excellence. And so hopefully you will experience those values while we're together. The second part of the model is the do. And that's, I always say, the part of the flame that touches the world around us, and that's our action in the world. And in politics, that's campaigning and governing. You can, when I was at City Year, this was about serving students in schools. You are all, waking up and doing things. And what we do develops us as well. But we all know that everything we do is influenced powerfully by something more internal, which is the know level of the flame. And that's about knowledge and skills and competencies. And of course, what we know about the work we do influences what we do. And I know, service programs put a lot of energy into how do we make sure that our participants have the knowledge and the skills and the competencies they need to be successful in their service. But there's a fourth and final piece that completes this model here, which is the innermost B level of the flame. And that's about identity. And the idea is, at the deepest place, it's about who we are as human beings. And all of this works together. It's all important. And, when we think about leadership development, we think, are we working at all four of these levels in an integrated way? But to be clear, our time together for this session is really going to be focused on the B level of the flame. So what does that mean? It's a little jargony, the B level of the flame. It's the innermost level of the flame. It's about individual identity. And implicit in this model is this understanding that everything we do and all that we know, it's an expression of who we are. It comes from that deepest part of ourself. And here's the thing, that who we are today on Tuesday afternoon or Monday afternoon, it's just a moment on the journey towards who we might become. And once we arrive at that understanding of things, then some leadership challenges become clear, right? We learn we have to stay awake to who we are becoming right now. And, coming off the year we have just come off of, so much happening, and how are we allowing the events around us to shape us? Can we be awake to that in the moment is one key challenge. But we also have to stay present to who we aspire to become in the future, right? So we can't just be blown around like a bag in the wind. We should have our own aspiration to move towards and to keep us kind of guided. So some important leadership stuff that we have to do. And here's the thing, I have learned the hard way, nobody can be forced or compelled to do this work. All I can do is offer all of you a very sincere invitation today. So that's really what I'm here to do. And it's an invitation to undertake an inner journey of exploration, growth, and insight. That is what our time together today is really going to be about. And we take this idea of a journey really seriously. Our thinking is really informed by a guy named Joseph Campbell. There might be some fans of his on the call. He was a comparative mythologist. So he studied myths told all around the world, north, south, east, and west, from what we know of caveman mythology up to modern Hollywood blockbusters. And he realized every culture has been really telling the same story. Underneath all these seemingly totally different stories was the same story that kept coming up. And the fact that it's so universal means this must be some process we have to go through to achieve our full potential. And at its most basic, it's got 3 stages. And it always begins with a departure where you're in some familiar, comfortable worlds, and you step across a threshold into something you don't fully understand. And I always think of joining a service program as definitely feeling this way. You're leaving behind what you know and stepping into a strange world. And that is when you encounter the road of trials, where you are really tested and challenged. And I know, City or Corps members, it was tough. Service really pushes you in really powerful ways. And in confronting those challenges, you change the world around you. So it's powerful, but the metaphorical slaying of the dragon is never the end of the journey. There's always a third and final stage, which is, it turns out we get gifts from our struggles. We learn things. We're changed in positive ways. And the real final step of the journey is when we find some way to use whatever we have learned to be of service to somebody else. That's the return, when we use the gifts of our struggles to help somebody else. So we invite anybody thinking about politics. Really, I was, at City Year, we invited anybody thinking about a year of service to understand themselves to be on this kind of journey. It's a whole framework for understanding what we're immersed in. And, we can only illuminate the path. We have 75 minutes together, have some exercises for you. But to be really clear, you have to choose to take this journey. So I can't do it for you, and you'll get out of this what you put into it. Make sense, folks? Okay, folks ready to give this a try to start the journey here? So here's where we always begin for folks. We always begin here with crafting a personal leadership mission statement. And here are the instructions. It should begin with the phrase, "My mission is." 3 to 6 sentences long. The idea is we're writing an essay, we're distilling an essence, not writing an essay, right? So you want to get something concise. something we're always working towards, but won't necessarily complete or achieve. And similarly, it's not about specific tasks or quantifiable goals. I know service programs have a lot of this. City Year was chock full of specific tasks and outcomes and metrics and all of this. And this is meant to complement that stuff, not replace it. So to go along with that, and that's because the invitation here is to think about who do you want to be, not what you want to do. And it just recognizes we're larger than any role we currently hold or position we temporarily fill. And we're invited to connect with that deeper sense of purpose. And the story I always tell here is, you know, Rosa Parks, the civil rights icon, she paid her bills as a seamstress. So, and I'm sure she had skills and competencies. I'm sure she was a good seamstress and knew how to do it. But how important were those technical skills to the decision to not give up her seat on the bus? Right? There's just a deeper part of ourself that goes beneath those skills and competencies. And this is an invitation to connect with that part of ourself. So with that, I'm going to invite you all, I'm going to give you all 4 minutes to give it a try. Any questions before we jump in? I will ask you to speak out loud.
Yes, I don't, one thing I'm sitting here stymied because you said, don't address what it is we want to do, but who we want to be.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a different way.
This will take me hours.
Well, see what comes up. Give it a try. We'll have give it a try. Take 4 minutes and see what comes up, and we'll have some time to debrief. Okay. All right, folks. Let's go. 4 minutes. Good luck.
And Max, I see a question in the chat box. Will this presentation be available to listen to after the meeting? And it absolutely will. We are recording the presentation and we'll have it on our website for about 4 weeks at the conclusion of the summit. And so folks can come back and review the material.
Good.
About 1 more minute. Okay, folks, 4 minutes. No worries if you're not totally done. That is not a whole lot of time to do that, but hopefully you got a start on it. So would love to do hear from you all, and hopefully we can do some mix of people dropping this into the chat and also speaking up out loud, but would love to hear, what is it like to try and craft your personal leadership mission statement? And I see some folks are already dropping stuff in the chat, which is amazing. But before we get to your mission statements, would love to hear, what's it like to try and do this? Easy, hard, terrifying, fun? Anybody willing to jump in? Oh, Allie, I see you raised a hand.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Actually, it was a little bit hard. I had to craft it, delete it, and then craft it again. So tried to do it multiple times, but finally came to write few lines. And do you want me to read my mission statement?
Not yet, not yet. I appreciate your willingness, and maybe later. But first, let's hear it. It looks like Melissa Hostin has her hand up.
Ostin.
Okay, thank you for correcting me. How was it for you?
I thought it was pretty interesting because I found like I had all these pieces and it was about organizing them in a way that made sense. And like I thought it did, and then I flipped it and I was like, wow, that really makes sense. So it was pretty exciting at the end, but it was pretty confusing in the middle.
Yeah. You know, we have all these vague ideas, but to go from that like general ideas to this is the words I'm going to use, this is like me articulating my mission, takes some work. And I see from Tricia, she's done this before. You know, some folks, this is revisiting work you've done in the past. And for some folks, it's a first time. Either way, there's value in just checking in with this. And Kathy says, hard certainly makes you think about your end results. Anybody else feel moved to share kind of what the process was like for you? I can't resist checking in. Carol, challenge by choice, you can pass, but how'd it go for you after your...
It was kind of difficult because I remember when I was in college, I went back to college in my 50s, and I was kind of sheltered. I hadn't had professional positions where there were mission statements, so I had to learn what that meant in the first place. Well, when I was assigned by various teachers to come up with a mission statement appropriate for that particular class, I wasn't given 4 minutes. I was given a day or two. Yeah. So I feel very much on the spot. I felt kind of, I don't know the right word, amateuristic, because in my position in life as a senior citizen, I'm supposed to know what I'm doing.
Oh. Right. I mean, I will say one reason why we're committed to this work is because all of us, to some degree, are strangers to ourselves. Like there's for all of us.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Which we're not fully connected as deeply as we can be. And so there's always some work to be done around that. Great. And I'm seeing some great stuff. Tori says it was fun to drill down with focus. Also hold it lightly as a point in time. Yes. You know, it's totally fine if 3 months, 6 months down the road, you look at this and say, these words need to change. I'm a little bit different than I used to be. But what is not okay is to go a year or a decade or a lifetime just not paying attention to this, right? Just not being mindful at all, right? So great stuff. And I see lots of people who are willing to have shared their mission statement. Can I get a volunteer challenge by choice? Somebody willing to read their mission statement out loud for us? Justin, is that a hand up? Is that a willingness to do this?
Yes, that is. Yeah, thanks. So this was interesting for me because I've been working on this stuff for quite a while, but framing it in this perspective, I always like a new, fresh approach. So I've done a little bit of the work beforehand, so I was cheating. But to reframe it in a shorter, concise way, my mission is to exist with purpose, on purpose, and for a purpose. Living with purpose means approaching each day with mindfulness, compassion, and authenticity. On purpose is about being intentional and for a purpose is about doing good in the world and serving people and our planet.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Let's hear a couple more. One or two more willing to say it out loud, and I'm loving this stuff showing up in the chat. But if there's somebody else who's willing to say it out loud, Alita, am I saying your name right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. You willing to share yours?
Sure. So my mission is to be someone I can be proud of, someone who radiates confidence. My mission is to teach the world one student at a time. My mission is to help in the barriers that the world puts on us. My mission is to see past students' weaknesses and see what they bring to the classroom.
Beautiful. Had you written that before, Alita?
No.
See, I've learned in this work, you don't need 6 weeks in the lotus position on a mountaintop. 4 minutes and people do some really powerful stuff. That's great. Thank you for sharing. How about one more out loud? Anybody else willing?
I've got one.
Great. Whoever said that, go for it.
Yeah, this is Michael Colbert. My mission is to strive to be the best role model for the next generation, to be of service for others for the greater good. I desire to leave the world and community a better place by being caring and understanding, and speaking up and doing good for those less fortunate around us.
Have you written that before, Michael?
No, that was a new one.
Beautiful stuff. Beautiful stuff. Thank you. And thanks to everybody who is posting. If folks haven't scrolled through the chat here, just beautiful stuff. What is it like hearing this or reading this stuff said out loud? Anybody willing to share? What does this evoke for you? Hearing people share their mission statements. Anybody willing to offer a thought?
It shows people that have compassion. It really does. It really shows that people really do care and how they want to make a difference in the world, especially in this generation. I mean, the baby boomers and the millennials and all that, we have to reteach people, but hearing all this is really wonderful.
Interesting. And I do have to say, as a leadership development person, a lot of the power is this is trusting that it's there. Like this was not downloading into anybody, just an invitation and to connect with self, and always powerful what comes up. And I see, it's powerful and inspiring, empowering. How about one more comment out loud? One more thought on what is it like to hear this stuff?
I can say for myself, it was, I guess it helped me refocus because I do a lot of volunteer and different types of leadership work in all different aspects of my community. So your prompt really helped me refocus. What am I doing here? Because there's so much going on at once, all the time.
Yeah, awesome. Great stuff, everybody. I'll share one quick story that I find is helpful for people to understand this idea of being. I did this exercise in a business school once and did just what I did, gave the instructions, gave 4 minutes. And right at the end of 4 minutes, somebody's hand shot up and was like, I want to share my mission statement. And he said, I'm going to be a billionaire by the time I'm 40. And everybody in the class laughed a little because it was so audacious and clear. But then I said, that's what you want to do, not how you want to be. And, are you going to be like a compassionate listener, an amazing mentor who lifts up everybody along the way and everybody kind of just loves you as you get there? Or are you going to leave a trail of human wreckage and just be a horrible person on your path to that goal? And so that captures the idea of you can walk the path to the same goal in very different ways. And this is what we're trying to get at, is like, how do you want to be as you move towards whatever it is you want to move towards? And it's a rhetorical question, but I invite you to imagine what Arizona and the country and the world would look like if everybody on this call right now woke up every day and lived their mission from here on out. And imagine what that kind of world would look like. So it's a lot of beautiful stuff. And a big part of me wishes that we could just stop right there and end at this place of idealism and inspiration. But we have learned that there's we can't stop here. There's a related piece of work that's definitely not done as often, but it's really important. And we talk about owning our shadow. So this is the related piece of work here. And here's how we think about this. light and shadow, they always coexist. They just go together, right? If you're in a totally dark room and you can't see anything and you light a candle, two things spring into existence at the same moment, the light and the shadow, and they're interconnected. So the lighter the bright, the darker the shadow. So this is just truth. Light and shadow go together. Every light casts a shadow, and we think if we want to strengthen our light, which is without a doubt our intention, then we have to confront our shadow. We have to do this work. And it really comes from Carl Jung, a psychologist who wrote a lot about the shadow. And he says to confront a person with their shadow is to show them their own light. And the idea is if we haven't done this work, we just simply don't understand ourselves. We don't know ourselves in our wholeness. And the parts of ourselves that we don't know and understand can influence us beyond our awareness. So this is work we have to do to really live our mission as powerfully as possible. And another reason why I'm so committed to this is Jung also says, basically, if we haven't owned our shadow, if we haven't looked at this part and said, this is part of who I am, then what we end up doing is we project the stuff that we don't like in ourselves, and we see it, we project it on some other, and we think that they possess all the parts that we refuse to see in ourselves. So we think that they are angry or dishonest or untrustworthy or all this, or lazy, all this negative stuff. And there's a lot of othering in the world. There's a tremendous amount right now of dehumanization and othering. And this is some small piece of personal work we can do to resist and kind of transform that dynamic that is so powerful in the world right now. Okay, so we're going to explore shadow using the wisdom of myth. And I've already mentioned this guy, Joseph Campbell. We're going to go deeper into his stuff. This is the book, A Hero with a Thousand Faces, where he first presented this insight that there was this one story underneath all these different stories. And he says some really powerful stuff about myth. So he says, myths represent the wisdom of the species by which man has weathered the millennium. And, you know, if ever there was a moment to dip back into the wisdom of the species that got us here from caveman times, feels like this would be a pretty good moment to dip back into that ancient wisdom. And he also says, when we understand them properly, myths become transparent to transcendence, which is really a beautiful phrase. That means they point beyond themselves to universal truths of the human experience. They're not about what they seem to be about. They're about really universal stuff. So we're going to try and access this ancient wisdom with a modern myth that I'm sure most of you are at least somewhat familiar with. You don't have to love it to get much out of this, but I think many of you will be familiar. So this is George Lucas. I assume most people know he's the guy behind Star Wars. We're going to go pretty deep into Star Wars for a few minutes here. And he has written that he wrote many drafts of this work, meaning Star Wars. And that's when he stumbled across The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And he read that and said, this is what I'm doing. So he has made it very clear that he wrote Star Wars to be a modern interpretation of Campbell's work. And this is Joseph Campbell. There's an awesome story where Campbell went to the Lucas Ranch and watched a bunch of the movies in one day and basically said, this is my best student. So I share this to say this is not me trying to invent connections where they don't exist. It's very clearly documented that Star Wars was written to kind of follow this journey. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how myths work. And I have to use the 1977 version because that's the one that matters to me. But we could redo this PowerPoint for the newer one. But I hope you can see we're seeing past the details here to access something deeper. So in a myth, there's the hero. And the hero is often a young adult seeking meaning and adventure. Do any of you on this call know any of those folks by any chance? And the hero is about things like service to a cause larger than self, idealism, empathy, part of a team, cares about making the world a better place, right? But in myth, we know if there's a hero, then there has to be something else, right? This is just the way myths work. There's a hero and then there's the villain. And in Star Wars, the defining characteristic of the villain is a human being who's become dehumanized. So this is Campbell's kind of modern, or George Lucas's modern take, that in the modern times, the villain is more machine than human. It used to be they were some kind of animal. They were, like a demon or a wolf person, but in the modern version, they are somehow mechanical. They're not human anymore. And they engage in I-it relationships, meaning they treat everybody around them as objects to manipulate for their own ends. They don't see people as human beings with their own hopes and dreams. They're just objects to manipulate, really driven by power and ego and ruled by the dark emotions like fear and jealousy and anger, right? So this is a pretty standard myth setup, and you could do this for any story out there, Harry Potter, or yeah, just name your myths, right? But here's the thing. Campbell says, when we understand them, myths illuminate an inner struggle. And the genius of George Lucas was to project this struggle on the largest canvas you could possibly imagine, literally a struggle of galactic proportions. But really, it's just a metaphor for energies within the self. This myth, as every myth, is just a metaphor for parts of ourselves that are in conflict and working against and around each other. So we're going to try and read Star Wars. We're going to try and use this new pair of glasses to understand myth, and we're going to use Star Wars. So y'all ready to give it a try? Take this journey, see where we go? Okay. So as I said, every journey begins with a departure where you leave behind the familiar and comfortable. And you know, Luke lived his entire life on this incredibly boring desert planet with his aunt and uncle, and suddenly his aunt and uncle get killed, and he has to leave everything he's ever known. And that's always how it starts. And that is the beginning of the road of trials. And you know, the first thing is we discover we're members of an ancient tribe of warriors. We discover we're part of a lineage. And at first, the ways of this tribe are really strange and mysterious. So the first challenge is a process of initiation, where we're introduced to the ways of this tribe. And here's Luke learning about the lightsaber and the Force for the first time. And you know, at City Year, we used to have a month of basic training academy. So you know, folks who do service programs know a little bit about those first couple of weeks, where you have to initiate participants into, this is the way of our tribe. This is how we do things here. And we encounter a pressing public problem, and we realize that we have a role to play in addressing it. This is suddenly on us. There's this big thing, and we are going to take a stand. And we also discover we have to resist entering a state of obedience and conformity that's destructive to our humanity. There's this pathway, but we can't choose that. We have to summon the courage to walk a different path. And here's one of the things you learn all the time from myth is that if we were going to confront this great public challenge, we have to develop ourselves, because there's this connection between our own growth and development and our capacity to transform the world around us, right? And so, you know, this is Yoda, and Yoda's an archetype, the sage, the mentor. And there's this, you know, close your eyes, turn inwards. We discover that we have capacities within ourselves that are undeveloped, and we have to work on cultivating those capacities if we're going to be able to take on the challenges that we aspire to take on. And while we're in this, you know, kind of ongoing work of self-development, we're always encountering tests and challenges that push us past our known limits. Just kind of again and again and again, we are faced with hard stuff that we have to push past. And by confronting those tests, we transform the world around us. But also, because we keep going past our known limits, we keep discovering within ourselves these hidden depths. We have strength and courage and wisdom and skill that was always there, but we never would have discovered it if we hadn't gone past what we thought we could do, right? So there's this kind of continuing discovery of the gifts within ourselves. And then I would say, you know, this is a moment that we're at as a country, as a world, I think. A moment arrives when we become so focused on the urgency of our public challenge that we neglect our own inner journey. And we learn two really hard things. And this is like, my kids at school need me. There's too much work for me to do. I don't have time for any more training. I'm serving people. I just got to get at it. And so the first thing is we're not ready. We're not as strong as we need to be to confront this problem. And, you know, for those who know the movie, Luke leaves his training, leaves Yoda. He's like, my friends need me. They're in trouble. I have to go. I just have to go. And so he meets Darth Vader, and excuse the gore, but this is Darth Vader cutting off Luke Skywalker's hand because Luke Skywalker is nowhere near ready. He's just very easily beat by his father. And then here's the other thing, and this is the key reason why I love using myth for this, is this is the moment when we realize a really powerful thing, which is that the dark side is not separate from us, it's within us. And this leads to one of the most famous moments in Hollywood history, right? Where we get this moment where the villain reveals the truth that the villain is actually the hero's father. And that is not an easy piece of news for the hero there. It's actually really a crisis. And I want to pause there. Why is that such a crisis? What happens in that moment? If anybody wants to speak out loud or drop it in the chat, what makes that moment so hard for the hero? They're willing to offer a thought.
Nobody wants to admit that we're bad.
Nobody wants to admit that we're bad. Yeah, the enemy is within. I'm seeing it challenge what you thought you knew about yourself. Excellent. Yeah, you know, before that moment, the world was very simple. I'm good and evil is out there. And so all I have to do is fight the evil outside of myself. But with that moment, suddenly there's this realization that actually the dark side is part of me. And now I'm engaged with a struggle with a part of myself, which is just a completely different piece of work to be doing, right? It's a completely different thing to take on. But this is what myth teaches us all the time, is the most difficult trial of our journey is confronting the shadow within ourselves, is looking at this part of us that we don't like and confronting it. So at this moment, we recognize we have to rededicate ourselves to even more self-mastery. We have to continue working on ourselves with a special focus on mastering things like anger and hatred and cynicism and other dark emotions. And I just have to say, I don't think I've ever been tested the way I have been over the last few years at feeling these things and not letting them take over. This is just a very real spiritual challenge, especially for anybody doing service and is at the front lines and sees all the injustice, all the need, all the stuff that is not the way we would want it to be, and to experience these emotions, but work with them skillfully so that they don't take us over. Right, so we have to keep working until we're kind of able to be with all of that, and we're equal to the magnitude of the challenge we seek to confront. And of course, all of this, right, so here's Luke, and he's finally ready. He's finally done his training, and we all know that all of this is just prelude. All of this is just preparation for what everybody knows is coming in every myth, which is the final epic confrontation, the ultimate battle, right? Light meets dark, and what's going to happen? And here's what we discover in that battle. So the first is the bad guy was never fully dehumanized. There was always a spark of empathy, even in the darkness. And for those who don't remember the movie, this is the Emperor, and he's using Force lightning to kill Luke. And Darth Vader, who's really been a terrible person all the way through, suddenly has this moment as like, that's my son, and he picks up the Emperor and throws him into the abyss. So there was empathy in there all the time, right? The darkness was never completely dark. And then the second key thing is that reconciliation of the dark and light sides of the Force is not only possible, this like encounter. And here's, for the first time, Luke sees the human face of his father, right? So it's not only possible, it's the whole purpose of the journey. The entire story arc of Star Wars is about this kind of traveling through the dark side and arriving at this place of reconciliation and balance. And somehow there's this connection between balance within the self and balance in the universe around us. And it's really, this is what the whole story is about, is that conflict and struggle that arrives at this place of reconciliation and balance, right? And remember, all of this is a metaphor. It's not really about Jedis and Sith Lords and funny aliens and spaceships. Those are just metaphors for forces within ourselves, for light and dark. And that's why we tell this story over and over and over again with different details, because we're just always working with these parts of ourselves. Okay, so with that, as a way of understanding what is the shadow, like why do we do this? What is it, what is this thing we're talking about? So now I'm here to invite you once again to do another piece of work, which is to own the shadow side of yourself. And here's how we do it. It's connected to our mission, because remember, light and shadow are interconnected. So our personal leadership mission articulates our highest aspirations for who we want to be. The shadow mission really challenges us to illuminate the choices we make when we choose not to live up to our own aspirations. So it's something we often don't think about, but if we choose not to align with mission, what exactly are we choosing? And that's what we're forced to confront here. So, and I'll share my story here, which is, here's my leadership mission, which is to practice courage and compassion and honoring and helping others to honor the sacred interdependence of our world. And, I wrote this on a really powerful personal growth experience before I started working at City Year. And when I got to City Year, I said, Corps members need to do this. We need every Corps member to be crafting their mission. And it took a little while, but pretty soon we were able to kind of make this part of the Corps member experience to do that work of connecting with their mission. Now, at the same time I wrote this, I wrote my shadow, but I didn't share my shadow for a long time. And what happened is right about the time I got to City Year was when City Year began focusing on the high school dropout crisis. And over years, as we got more and more involved in education, the service just got more sophisticated. You know, there were higher stakes. We were saying we were going to make measurable impact on student achievement, which meant we had to have more trainings and more sophisticated trainings, and we had to gather data, and just the pressures ratcheted up, and the dark emotions were getting more intense. There was just more burnout, more frustration, you know, just hard stuff. And I realized if we don't find a way to work with this dark stuff with more skill, it's really going to start undermining our effectiveness. So here was my shadow. It was to practice cowardice and disconnection in dismissing and helping others to dismiss the sacred interdependence of our world. So if I'm not choosing courage, I'm choosing cowardice. And if I'm not choosing compassion, I'm disconnecting. And, you know, so I had this thought of I need to bring shadow to my organization, but it was a little bit terrifying to tell everybody I worked with, this is the dark side of myself. It would definitely have been easier to not do that. And I wasn't sure I wanted to be known with that level of wholeness by people. And I realized after really, you know, struggling with this, was I going to choose courage and do what scared me, or was I going to take an easy path, which would be, you know, choosing cowardice? And was I going to choose compassion and really try and invite everybody to be with their wholeness, or just disconnect? And this is what shadow work does, is it really makes these choices really clear. Like, what are you doing? And I realized the only way I could actually live my mission was to bring the mission to City Year. And it was scary, but also really gratifying to see how people find value in being able to work with this and talk about this in a different way. So that's my story. So now it's time for you all to give this a try. So I invite you to take a look at the leadership mission that you wrote, recognizing it's a draft, but then craft your personal shadow mission. And here are the instructions. Start with the phrase, my shadow mission is, and then articulate the choices you make when you choose not to live out your mission. And here's a really important idea. I invite you to think about shadow as what happens when we withhold our light, not when we spread darkness. So if you have a mission to spread love in the world, your shadow would be to withhold love, not to spread hate. You know, I'm not really worried about people becoming mass murdering, awful, you know, horrible people, but the idea that we might just withhold the good stuff because it's easier and more comfortable to choose a path of ease, that's a real challenge. So think about it as what happens if you were to withhold your light. And when you're done, people often say this feels like getting kicked in the gut. It is uncomfortable, but also you go, I know that person. I show up that way every now and then. So that's the instructions. Any questions before we jump in? Going once, going twice. All right, I'm going to give you a little less time, 3 minutes for this. Give it a try, and then we'll see what comes up for you. So go for it. Okay, folks. Again, no worries if you're not done. Hopefully you got a start on something there. What was that like? Anybody willing? As always, you can just drop stuff in the chat or speak up. But what's it like to try and own your shadow? Anybody willing to offer thoughts?
Me, Carol.
Carol, what do you got, Carol? How was it?
This was so easy. I don't
Okay.
understand why the other one was so hard.
Listen, you're not alone.
I said, my mission is to be an example of self-centeredness, perpetrator of gossip and lies, a critic of those less fortunate, an object of envy.
Listen, a lot of people, it flows, the shadow flows, but this is part of the power of seeing ourselves in our wholeness is then you can kind of reverse engineer your mission if your shadow is so clear. So what does it mean if you're not living your shadow? And this is what happens when we look at our wholeness is we actually understand our light a little more clearly.
Yeah. That's great.
Thank you. Thank you. Somebody else, what was this like? I've seen things in the chat, uncomfortable, reflective, but let's hear from a few more folks. What's it like to connect with your shadow? Anybody willing to offer a thought?
I'll give it a go.
Thank you.
I wrote that my shadow mission is to withdraw into myself, to isolate myself from others, to not reach out to others because of the fear of hurt or rejection. And that's one of the things that made this period of isolation so hard, because that was playing into my weakness. Here I was having to restrict my comings and my goings and dealing with people, and I was home more than I wanted to be. And I thought, this just plays into my weakness. I've got to fight this because I don't want to be that person that isolates themselves from others.
Powerful. Thank you for sharing, Janice. Thank you. And thank you for going so deep with this. It's powerful stuff. Thank you. And I see there's more great stuff. Forces me to address my focus naturally moves if I don't remain focused on my actual mission. Another person or two willing to speak out loud, kind of what this was like for you? Alita, you willing to say something there?
For me, it was kind of tough because I've worked really hard to gain confidence in myself and to get where I'm at. That thinking about the shadow version of me, which was me not that long ago, was very tough to kind of go back in that mindset.
Yeah, thanks for that, Alita. You know, one thing that I hope doing this work does is it removes the shame from, like, if we're human, we have a shadow. We have this part of ourselves that is not noble and inspiring, and it's part of being human. And the only question is, are we working with it in some kind of intentional way? But you are not the only person who has parts of the self that that doesn't make us proud. But thank you for that, Alita. Appreciate it. And, it also means you did it right if you're like, I know this person, and actually I've been this person, then that means you've done the work to really identify your shadow. Thanks for that. Anybody else feel moved?
Yeah, I'll go on this one.
Right.
So I said that my shadow mission was like to hold my tongue and not be too important, speaking for the community of people with disabilities, including those with autism like myself. I'll be dependent on others making choices due to my doubts and anxiety and be like everyone else. And then my knowledge and voice is silent to those who speak louder to me. And this is something that I'm still fighting on a regular basis because, I mean, there are times like, I know that there are times when I'm feeling like, when I feel like there's a lot of things going on, it can be very difficult to figure out things on my own. And sometimes I get criticized for that a couple times. And then also, this is something that I've seen happen a lot in the disability community is that like just because they're having a difficult time speaking or thinking for themselves, or they have a lot difficult time processing things. It feels like it feels like we're voiceless like a lot, because disability, like it feels like it's like the most like ignored like community like, throughout history.
Yep.
So I mean for me, writing that shadow mission is I would say it was a little bit more easier than writing the personal mission statement, but at the same time, I really, I mean, writing it is also very hard. It's like a harsh,
yeah, it's hard to look at.
Harsh reality about like what people like me have been through for like so many years, and I guess that it would encourage me more to think about what I want to do in terms of advocacy.
Appreciate that, Greg. And you should see there's some great stuff in the chat, just honoring you for speaking up about that. And thanks. And one thing that you highlight in your shadow is how, this is not about proactively being a terrible person. It's just kind of being quiet and letting the status quo go. And it can feel like just taking a path of ease that puts us where we don't want to be. And again, I just honor your doing the work so powerfully and sharing about it. Thank you for that. Anybody else feeling moved? How about,
Yeah, this is George.
Hey, George.
I'd like to share mine. And my shadow mission is to ignore my potential and underutilize my ability to impact my world. And to me, I had dual feelings in writing this, and it was hard. Number one, I was in denial of really understanding that I do have, or accepting that I do have the skills, the knowledge, the ability to have a higher impact. But at the same time, in writing this makes me discover the potential for me to have a higher impact and really make a better difference in my space, in my world.
Thank you, George. Appreciate that. Again, the idea here is we all have this. The only question is, are we working with it consciously? And part of Jung's theory is if we haven't done this work, then it influences us beyond our awareness. We end up sliding into our shadow without recognizing that we're sliding into it because we haven't looked at it so clearly. But when we do this, now we have a higher level of consciousness. We can be more intentional about our choice. So it's hard to look at, but it gives us power to choose. One. Thanks, George.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Great. Anybody else feel moved to either share their shadow or what this, what you're thinking about with this work? I know we're getting close to that.
I would like to do a little bit of sharing. It was reflective and a reminder of the feelings that I think I feel on a regular basis. And I crafted that I accept that both good and bad, fear and courage, and willingness to act or not act are within me.
Right.
And I take the responsibility of my both sides.
Yes.
And there is one more line I added. With acceptance of both sides of my nature, I will make intentional efforts to be on the good side.
Right.
So, yeah.
Love that. Love that. And part of this idea is when we are able to embrace the wholeness within ourselves, that we all have light and shadow, we all have this, we can see it in other people as well, right? And it actually allows us to be more compassionate rather than being that person is a terrible core member or they're not idealistic. We can see them as somebody who is struggling with their light and their shadow and trying to do this work and be with them in a different way. So I appreciate that, Allie. One final comment about the shadow. I believe we have to start wrapping this up soon, but one final comment or question about what this brings up for all of you. Anybody willing? And again, great stuff in the chat here for anybody.
Yeah, I'll go.
Thanks, Joe.
I'm just wondering, because a lot of Jung's work, he deals with the animus and animos, the male, the female.
Yep.
I'm wondering, purposely or societally speaking, is one gender forced into this shadow more so than others? Because thinking historically, at one point in time, women were not in the workforce. Post World War II, they had to suppress a lot. And they were ambitious and wanted to get out and make things happen. People of color, the opportunity, affirmative action. So you have these ambitions, you want to go forward, you have your mission statement, then here's the shadow cast upon you, whether it's self-inflicted or from society. And I don't know if your research or have delved into some of those things. I don't want to get too far from where you are. But
I know. Listen, somebody who's read a lot of Jung, that's awesome. And I would gladly grab a cup of coffee and talk for 3 hours about this stuff. But, I do think, yes, our identity, our kind of position in society influences what we're allowed to express and what we have to keep hidden, right?
Right.
Influences what is acceptable for us and what we are made to feel shame about. Yeah. So I do think there can be, it influences our shadow. But I also think each of us has unique life journeys and has to do this work for ourselves, if that makes sense. But I appreciate the question. Wish we could go deeper with it right now. But
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. All right, so unfortunately, we are pretty much at time here. Thank you all for going so deep. I know you're sharing your shadow with a bunch of strangers here in a virtual conference. It's a lot of courage. I appreciate your vulnerability in that stuff. I know they have an evaluation, but I will just say one more time, if you like this stuff, we go deeper into it in our Answering the Call program, and it's also part of our staffing school. So, applications are by March 22nd. If and I imagine you are all very plugged into service worlds, if you're willing to kind of let folks know and just get the word out, for anybody who has served and is thinking about politics, we are here to kind of hold people in this kind of space to do this work and invite people to turn inwards and reflect, what is it integrity for me to serve again through politics? And I'll post the link there one more time for anybody who wants to take a look at that. So thank you all. I will also post my email here. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, don't hesitate. And with that, just thank you all. It's an honor to be with you all. I appreciate the work that you're doing out there in the service movement in Arizona, and just hope this gives you a little more clarity about how to find your way forward in the challenging moment.
Thank you, Dr. Clow. It was an honor.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.